Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for clicking on this video. If you've seen my previous videos in sports psychology and you're here for more sports psychology content, don't worry, those videos are coming. But today I'm going to be going through every single book I've read in the last year in 2023. I'll be reviewing them quickly. So let's get started. The first book I read this year was Twilight, which I read in Dutch because I was at home in Belgium. And it was one of the only books I had. So I finished that on the 2nd of January. I rated it 3 stars actually, because it was just a very nostalgic book. It was just a really nice start to the year. Then I read The Hobbit, which I've never read any Tolkien before. So that was a new experience. I finished that on the 4th of January and I gave it 3 stars as well, because although I liked the story, it just wasn't anything special to me. And I know a lot of people will disagree. A lot of people will like yell at me, including my boyfriend. But it was fine. Like, I'm not saying it was a bad book. I'm just saying it wasn't one of my favorites. It didn't stand out to me, basically. Next, I read 2 Colleen Hoover books. I read Maybe Someday and Maybe Now. I had read It Ends With Us before this one. But other than that, these were the only 2 Colleen Hoover books I've read. I really like these books. I gave the first one, Maybe Someday, I gave 4.25 stars. And then the second one I gave 4.5 stars. I read them both across the span of like 2 days or something, or like 3 days. They're really quick, easy reads. I can't remember the names of the characters. I can't really remember the fine details of the book, but I still remember the story. I still think about the themes that she incorporated in the book, so I would highly recommend. Next, I read Mere Christianity. I finished that halfway through January. I gave it 5 stars. It's a really good book, all about the Christian faith, basics of the Christian faith. I would highly recommend it if you are Christian or if you're not a Christian. There's a lot of things I underlined in this book. I don't usually annotate my books, so when I underline and tab, that's a sign that it's a good book. It's a good one. This one is really easy to follow, really easy to read, and I just really enjoyed it. So highly recommend. First 5-star read of the year. Next, I read The Song of Achilles. Oh my goodness, 4.5 stars. Nearing to a 5. It is beautiful. It will probably have you cry. It is so amazing. It makes you think. It makes you feel all the emotions. Highly recommend putting it on your 2024 TBR. Next, I read A Court of Mist and Fury, which is a second book in the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. This series took over the book world last year. I can see why. I really enjoyed it. You really get swept up in the story, but it's not too much high fantasy. There's not too much world building. It's not too hard to understand. You kind of get straight into the story. You don't have to have all the background information before. I rated this 4.75, which I'm kind of surprised by. I think looking back, I would probably rate it more like a 3.5 to 4. It was not my favorite in the series. This is a lot of people's favorite. It wasn't my favorite in the series, but highly recommend. Get into the series if you would want to read some fantasy this year. Then I read A Court of Wings and Ruin. I really loved the third book. I think a lot of people feel like there's too much politics, it's too confusing, it's too hard to understand. I didn't really get that, and I'm not a politics gal. I don't get politics. I'm not interested in that. That's not for me in real life. But in the books, sign me up. I loved it. You get more into the war, you get more into the story, you get more into the actual story. I feel like the first book is setting things up as a whole, like the backstory, the background, where we are, the setting, the characters. Then the second book, you get more of a background story on the politics and the war and everything involved in that. Third book, war, politics, everything like that. It had me crying, it had me sobbing my eyes out at the end. And then after that, I read A Court of Frost and Starlight, novella in the series. I heard Destiny Sidwell here on YouTube describe it as the Christmas special of your favorite TV show, and after hearing that kind of explanation of it, I do like it more. I think originally when I read it, I rated it like 3.5 stars, which is not a great rating for me, but it's not bad. I think a lot of people don't really like this because it's not much of a story. It's just, like Destiny said, a Christmas special, so you're just kind of following a day in all their lives, all the characters' lives, and it is really nice. It was I recommend reading it if you're a fan of the series. If you're not really attached to the characters, if you don't really care that much, don't pick it up. But it's a really quick read, it's really short, it's a novella, so highly recommend it if you are into the series. And then after that, I read Heartstopper Volume 1, which was really good. I really enjoyed it. But I only read the first volume because I honestly kind of forgot to read the rest of them. At this point I was still back home in Belgium, so I was reading it from the library, and then I came back here in Scotland and just forgot to get the rest. But I do recommend it. It's a very quick read. It's a comic, it's not an actual book. Very quick read. There's a Netflix series on it as well if you prefer to watch the series. And then after that, we get to my favorite book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series, which is A Court of Silver Flames. Now, most people do not like this book. First 3 books, you're following Feyre, and she is kind of the main character in those 3 books. This one follows one of Feyre's sisters, which a lot of people don't like. A lot of people don't like the character, they don't like the book necessarily. Like I said, this book was my personal favorite. I really loved her character development. I loved how we got to get more of a backstory on her in this book, which made you understand the way that she behaves and the things that she does and says in the previous books more. I loved it. I think she really set everything up so well. She created this whole world beautifully. Highly recommend. I think I rated this one 4.75 stars, so get your hands on it. Then I read The Summer I Turned Pretty. You've probably heard of it through the Netflix series, but it's also a book series. I think I rated this like 3 stars. Yeah, I rated it 3 stars. I think it was good, it was fine, it was fun, it was quick, but it wasn't amazing. Next, I read Crown of Midnight. So after the ACOTAR series, which we've just spoken about, the same author, Sarah J Maas, if you don't know, also has another series called Throne of Glass, and then a 3rd series, which we'll get into in another video. The Throne of Glass series, I had read the first book, which is Throne of Glass, the year before. I think I read that in 2022. I can't remember when exactly, but at some point then. And then I put that to the side to read the ACOTAR series because it was recommended that you start with that series first. So then after finishing that series, I went back to the Throne of Glass series. So I didn't reread the first one, but I read the second one in the series called Crown of Midnight. I like this book. I love the whole series. I think the whole series as a whole, 5-star. Each individual book, not a 5-star. I think this one for me was a 4-star. This was a 4-star read. I kind of forget what exactly happens in each book, so it's kind of hard for me to really thoroughly review each and every single one of them. The series as a whole, I keep recommending to everybody because I love it. This is one of the series that I will keep thinking about. I can't wait to reread them, which is saying a lot because I don't usually reread books. After The Crown of Midnight, I read The Assassin's Blade. Technically, this is the prequel to the whole series. It was published second, I'm pretty sure. It was published second in the series, but there's a couple different opinions on when to read this book. So, from what I've heard, there's 3 main ways you can read it. Either you read this first and then go through the rest of the books, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, or you read this 3rd, or you read it 4th. I'm pretty sure. I think that's the way it's usually recommended. I read this 3rd, so I read Throne of Glass first, then Crown of Midnight, then The Assassin's Blade. I really liked the way I did that. I am not sure if I would have loved the series as much if I had done it the other way around, because the way I did it, I got some reveals and some more background information as I went along rather than having it all at the start, which I personally prefer. I personally prefer getting to know the character, and then as you go along the series, as you read further on, you find out more about their background. But some people do like to have the background before they go into the series so that they can understand what's happening more and understand the significance of certain events more. So it's up to you. Make your own decision on when to read this, but read it. Read the whole series, honestly. So good. So good. So after Assassin's Blade, I read The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. So it's kind of delving more into our purpose, what we're here for, all that kind of stuff. I liked it. It was not groundbreaking, it wasn't anything spectacular, it wasn't anything amazing, great, but I did like it. So I would recommend it, just maybe not as one of my top favorite Christian non-fiction books. Next, after The Purpose-Driven Life, I read Shuggie Bain. I liked it. I rated it 3.75 stars. So another one of those, like, it was good. Not one of my favorites though. I can see why it would be some people's favorites, but not one of mine. I do recommend reading it. I think this is one of those books that, it's not one of my favorites, but I would highly recommend it. I'm pretty sure it's either based on a real story or just is the author's story or something like that. Highly recommend if you are into reading about that. Then next I read Once Upon a Broken Heart, which is the first one in the Stephanie Garber, what's the series even called? Once Upon a Broken Heart? I don't know what the series is called, but the third one just came out in the last couple months. I read the first two, one after the other. I gave them both like 3.5 stars. They were fine. I know one of my friends loves the series, so I'm sorry, Michelle, but I just thought they were fine. They were nothing special to me. I feel like I would have enjoyed them more, again, if I had read them in high school. I feel like they were targeted more to a younger audience. I'm 27, so it just didn't hit for me. I also think because I like fantasy quite a lot, and because I'd read more higher fantasy books like the ACOTAR series and the Throne of Glass series, this one just didn't hit as much. Then after those two books, I read The Power of a Praying Woman, another non-fiction Christian book. I really enjoyed this one. I really liked the practicality of it. I really liked how the author really just broke down not just how to pray, but also why to pray and where the power in prayer is and stuff like that. So you would read through the chapter, which would be about different things, and she would include her own kind of life story and her own lessons and stuff that she had in the book. And then at the end of the chapter, she puts a prayer to God, so you have an actual prayer written out to pray if you want to do that. And then she also puts a list of God's promises to us relating to that chapter, so she puts different verses that connect to whatever she spoke about in the chapter, and I really enjoyed it. I'm pretty sure I gave this 5 stars. Did I? No, I gave it 4.75 stars, but still highly recommend. I know this is a series, as in I know that she's written more books on the topic, so I know that she's got Power of a Praying Woman, obviously, Power of a Praying Man, I presume as well. She's also got Power of a Praying Wife, Power of a Praying Husband, Power of a Praying Parent. So you get the gist, right? She's written a lot of these kinds of books on prayer and the power of prayer in different areas of your life and in different roles that you can have in life. After that one, I read Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Again, highly popular fantasy series. It's about a group of ragtag young bandits who form a crew and they go on a heist. And it's the first one in the duology. I've only read the first book, so I can't speak for the duology. But I really liked it. I give it 5 stars, which I didn't think I would reading through the book. I only made up my mind to give it 5 stars at the very end. I really enjoyed it. I've not picked up the second book in the series yet because there's just so many books I've wanted to read. But it's very high up on my TBR. Next, I read Kim Ji-young, born 1982. I gave this book 3 stars. If I'm honest, I don't really remember what it was about. I don't remember the storyline. I don't remember anything about it, really. I think this is one of those popular books that were alright for me, but not a standout, not anything great. Then I read In Cold Blood, which is obviously quite a classic thriller crime book. I gave that 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I think I expected something different from the story. I think I went into it with different ideas. I don't know where I got this presumption, but I thought the story was gonna be something different than it was, but I did like it. The reason I didn't give it 5 stars is because I felt like there was suspense missing. There was something missing from the story. It wasn't my favorite. I've read better thrillers, better crime books, and it just didn't hit, but it was fine. It was good. After that, I read Heir of Fire, which I have the copy of. Again, another book in the Throne of Glass series. It was good. Like I said before, I kind of forgot what each book contains because I've obviously read the series. I can't really remember exactly what happens in each book, but I loved it. I loved the whole series, so I think I rated this 4.25 stars. They're all a 4 and above. So highly recommend if you are into fantasy or want to get into fantasy or anything like that. Then after Heir of Fire, I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I gave that a 4.75. I think I would change that to a 5 star at this point after having reflected on it. I loved this book. I know a lot of people give it 2 stars, a lot of people don't like it. I absolutely loved it. Whether this is really sad or not, I could really relate to the main character, and I love the way that the author explained it and wrote it out, and I love the way that she approached it. She didn't hold back, she didn't romanticize it, in my opinion. I really, really loved it. I highly recommend that book. Next, I went into Magnolia Parks universe. So I read the first one, which is just called Magnolia Parks. I gave that a 4.75 stars. Really loved that book. I've heard it described as a British Gossip Girl, so like think Gossip Girl but set in London. Really entertaining. I love Gossip Girl. I loved this, and I can't wait to read the rest of the books that I've not yet read in the series. Next, I went into Most of All You by Mia Sheridan. From what I remember, I want to say this is a small town romance. Yes, yeah, I remember now. Small town romance. Really, really liked it. There's another book by Mia Sheridan called Archer's Voice, which Steph Boer here on YouTube really loves, and I can't wait to read that. But started with this one, gave it 5 stars. I loved it. I don't remember much about the story, which is kind of funny considering I gave it 5 stars, but highly recommend. Next, I read the second book in the Magnolia Park series called Daisy Hates. Here we follow another character in the universe, and again, loved it. 4.75 stars. I think I prefer the characters in this book for relating to, but I prefer the characters in the first book to read about, if that makes sense. Like the characters in the first book, I like reading about and having like the outside perspective and view on and being nosy and knowing what's going on in their lives. Whereas this couple, I like the girl. Like I can't, it's one of those I can't figure out whether I want to be her or like be her friend kind of thing, but loved it. Highly recommend the series. Then I read my first Emily Henry book, which was You and Me on Vacation, which I gave 3.75 stars. I think I liked it. Again, nothing special. I can't even really remember what the story is about. It was fine. It was a quick summer read. Then I read Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas, another in the Throne of Glass series. Like I said before, I'm not going to spend much time on this because don't remember what exactly happens in each and every single book. This one I gave 4.75 stars, so I think this one was one of my favorites in the whole series. This is where the books get a little bit chunkier as well. But yes, highly recommend. Read the whole series. I don't know how many more times I need to tell you. After Queen of Shadows, I read The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. This was another thriller book. I don't read a lot of thriller books because I think it's really, really hard to find good thriller books. If you have any recommendations, let me know. But I enjoyed this one. It was a 3-star. It was a quick and easy read. It didn't take me much time. I flew through it, but there was also not really a plot twist. Like I think she tried to do a plot twist, but I kind of guessed it from the get-go. That might just be me though. I don't know. You might love it. I thought it was fine, but nothing special. Next, I read Tower of Dawn and Empire of Storms. So if you're unfamiliar with the Throne of Glass universe or the Throne of Glass series, these 2 books, which are the penultimate and the one before that, you can read as a tandem read. So that basically means you switch between each book, right? So I can't remember which one you started in, but say you started in this one, read a couple chapters, and then switch to this book, read a couple chapters, switch back to this one, read chapters, and so on and so forth, right? There's a whole link online. If you just Google Throne of Glass tandem read, you will find the like reading order. I loved doing the tandem read. You don't have to, you can just read them as like standalone books, but I loved doing the tandem read. I think I really, really enjoyed the experience it gave because these 2 books are happening at the same time, right? They're the same timeline. You're just following 2 different groups from our story, from our series. I'm trying so hard not to give anything away, but you're following the 2 different groups and they're off on like 2 different quests kind of. So it's happening at the same time, but in 2 different parts of the world. I recommend doing the tandem read. I recommend these books. I gave these books 4.25 stars each. After the tandem read, I finished the series with Kingdom of Ash, which is obviously the biggest book in the series. I think this is just under 900. Oh no, just under 1,000. I loved this book. I think I gave it 5 stars. Not necessarily because of what happens in the book, but because of how it wraps up the whole entire story. I loved how she ended the series. I loved how she tied everything back together. I love how it all came together in the end. and I encourage you very, very strongly to get into the series this year. Read them, get into the Sarah J Maas universe, and you'll understand why everybody is obsessed with these books. After that one, I went and read The Partner by John Grisham. This is my first John Grisham book. I enjoyed it. It wasn't anything special. I gave it 3.5 stars. I could kind of see the plot twist at the end coming from a mile away, but it was good. I think while I read it, I kind of got Suits vibes, like, you know, the Netflix series Suits. I kind of got those vibes, but in a book form. And I apologize if the angle or anything else has changed. My camera battery died, so I had to change it and put you guys back. We're on to the final 5 books that I've read in 2023. So after reading The Partner, I read Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. I gave that 5. Yeah, I gave that 5 stars. Loved the book. She is the same author that wrote Atlas 6 and other books that have become really, really popular. I have not yet read them. This was my first Olivia Blake book, but I highly recommend, and I can't wait to read her other books. I love the writing in it. I love the way that she expressed and wrote about different feelings and emotions and things that the characters were going through. I cannot recommend this enough. Please, 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 please go read. I loved this book. Then after that, I got into the Chestnut Springs series by Elsie Silver. So I gave all these books 3 stars. This is a small town romance series, cowboys set in Canada, and each book you're kind of just following a different brother or a different member of the family, and I liked each book. They weren't fantastic, they weren't groundbreaking, they weren't great, but I thoroughly enjoyed them. They were a good 3 stars, you know, they were a solid 3 stars. I do recommend reading these books if you're into romance, small town romance, all that kind of stuff. To quickly go through the tropes, in the first book called Flawless, you have a bull rider and the boss's daughter. Second book, Heartless, you have single dad nanny trope. The nanny is the best friend of the boss's daughter from the first book, and the single dad is the bull rider's brother. Then thirdly, we have Powerless. Powerless is a childhood best friends to lovers story. So the guy is like an adopted brother to the other brothers from the previous books. The girl is the cousin of the actual brothers. Then the fourth book, Reckless, is about the girl from the first book, so the boss's daughter, her sister, and Bull Rider from the first book, his mentee. Recommend. Don't know what else to tell you. Get into the series. Don't expect too much from it. It's not groundbreaking, it's not earth-shattering, unless you're into small town romance, then maybe it is. I don't know. But those were all the books I read in 2023. I read 39 books. In 2024, I want to read 50 books, which I think is very doable. I will not be reading much in the month of January because I'm doing a Bible shred, which means that I'm reading through the whole entire Bible in the month of January, so I'll probably not be able to read a lot of other books aside from that, but I am going to read 50 books this year. I have a couple different goals, so I want to include more classics, include a couple more non-fiction books, and I'm also on a book buying ban because I have too many physical copies of books that I have not yet read. I will make another video going through every single book that I own that I've not yet read, aka my physical TBR. It will be the next video after this one. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any other recommendations or if you have any more questions about any of the books I spoke about, don't hesitate to ask me down below and I will make sure to get back to you. Alright, that was it from me for now. I hope you're well and I will see you soon.